Kirk Cousins the last couple times, and he has picked them apart. So what does John Gannon do? Does he ask Slay or Bradbury, hey, you're going to be manned up with Jefferson. The other guy's going to be manned up on the other side with Thielen, and let's see what happens. Because you would think the Eagles can play more man because they have some better linebackers now. But Gannon hasn't really shown through one game anyway that he is changing the way he's calling his defense, even with new personnel.
Is everybody. Mike Gill in the house. Every Monday we have Mike Gill here to recap an Eagles win, hopefully, but we don't have an Eagles game. That's tonight. Mike and I will be at the link later tonight, but we got to recap this wild and crazy week 2 of NFC East games, and we'll start with the Cowboys. Mike, what were your initial thoughts on that game?
Well, it was the kind of game the Cowboys need if they want to hang in this division, which is they need their defense to dominate. 11 was all over the place. I mean, absolutely wrecked that game for since he was Parsons just absolutely dominated Cincinnati. Cincinnati's a mess. I mean, they fixed that offensive line, which was their big problem last year. It doesn't look fixed unless it was just Parsons was that good. Could be, but their line was a disaster yesterday. Couldn't protect. They ran the ball well, Dallas. Give Cooper Rush some credit. He made some tough throws. I thought the Cincinnati defense looked confused, and that's hard to do against Mike McCarthy. But Dallas did what they had to do for a week anyway. Their defense led them. They ran the ball with Zeke. Pollard had a big day. That's the kind of game Dallas needs to kind of weather the storm. If they can get Dak Prescott back sooner than later, they'll be in this thing.
Long term, I still don't know about Cooper Rush, but you're right, Mike. They did what they needed to do yesterday. Built that 14-3 lead. Rush played really well. My biggest concern with Dallas yesterday was after they took the 14-3 lead, they did nothing offensively.
That's going to be their problem. You know, they're going to have to get out to leads or keep them close and make it a close game because of their defense and hope that their defense can carry them. You know, a couple of years ago, wasn't last year. I think it was the year before, maybe it was last year, where they just had an inordinate amount of turnovers that they got. You can't really rely on getting that many turnovers, but in this little, pie without Dak Prescott, that might be their formula. Keep the games close, try to get a touchdown or two with the offense, and then maybe, their defense yesterday got a couple turnovers. The sacks just were Parsons it was ridiculous. I'm thinking to myself, how did this team make the Super Bowl last year? They looked horrible last week. They look horrible again this week. The line doesn't look fixed. I mean, that Bengals team has big problems, it looks like. But this is the NFL. Next week, they'll probably win 35-0.
You know how they made the Super Bowl? The Chiefs blew it in the second half. That's how they made it.
Yeah, but the fact that they were there, the fact that they were even in the game, you're looking at this was a playoff team a year ago, and they upgraded in the offseason. I think we all felt, man, this team's offensive line was such a problem last year. What did they do? They went out and did something the Bengals never do. They went out and fixed the problems that they had. Didn't look fixed yesterday, but I didn't think Dallas was going to be a 4-13 type of team just because Dak went out, because that defense is good enough to let them hang around.
That defense in Dallas is going to be a problem. And one thing I had an issue with Cincinnati yesterday was, and I was telling Tone this before you came on, I do not like how Joe Burrow has to do 7-step drops all the time. They're looking for the 50-yard bomb every single play. It's like playing 4 verticals in Madden. And it feels like that ultimately led to Burrow getting hit, Parsons dominating the game, and Cincinnati not getting their feet wet until the fourth quarter. Yeah,
their offense just looks like it is way off base right now. It looks like it's a one-trick pony that they haven't been able to kind of get the timing right. Look, they weren't right out of the chutes a good team last year. They kind of got better as the year went on. They really got hot in the playoffs. They're missing one of their wide receivers. But look, they still have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Boyd's out. But I think their offensive line is still a problem. I mean, they were supposed to fix it. It's not pass protecting. Mixon ran the ball a little bit yesterday, but they just – and again, could it be because of Parsons? Okay, I'll take that. But they didn't block very well last week either. They were lucky now. They faced a good Pittsburgh pass rush last week too. So we'll see as this season materializes for them. But I think the story was Dallas. I really do. I mean, I think when you look at Dallas, we asked them to kind of get their running backs more involved. Pollard, I think, had 9 carries yesterday for 43 yards. CeeDee Lamb, 7 for 75. So he kind of balanced it out. He was able to kind of make some catches in some spots. And I thought Elliott had his best game in probably a year. I mean, if you take all his games from last year, yesterday, 15 carries for 53 yards, but he had some big rushes at key times in that game. I mean, maybe yardage output wasn't his best, but he looked a little like he had a little extra yesterday for the first time in a while, because he has looked slow, and you're just kind of like, why won't they make the change? Yesterday, I thought Elliott ran with a little bit more of a purpose.
Do you still think they give the ball to him too much, though?
Yeah, I mean, because Pollard's on my fantasy team. But yeah, I do. I think, this league, seemingly it's the smaller, quicker guy. When I say smaller, quicker guy, I'm not talking about, some 5'8", 190-pound shifty back. I'm talking about just like guys who have a little bit more speed and explosion. And then the big guy kind of comes in, kind of like with the Eagles, the year. Well, I guess that's not a great example, because LeGarrette Blount and Jay Ajayi were both bigger, pounding type of backs. But, you get that guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire out in Kansas City is a smaller pass catcher. He runs hard, but he's smaller. And then you bring in Pacheco, who's a bigger guy. And the first week you saw that. They didn't really use it in week number 2. But the guy Pollard is the more explosive back. I think we can all agree on that, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And the fact that they don't give him as many touches, I think limits their big playability, especially in an offense that could really use a shot in the arm.
Do you think Dak Prescott comes back next week like Stephen Jones says he might?
No, I don't. I mean, I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, just because they didn't put him on the injured list. So the timeline would say this week or next week, this week 3 coming up, or week 4 for them, because they didn't IR him. So that means they think you have a shot. I mean, but go back to a couple years ago. My sprinklers just went on behind me here. You remember the Eagles didn't IR Alshon Jeffrey the whole season, and they kept thinking he's going to come back, he's going to come back, he's going to come back, and he never did. He never ended up coming back. So there's a possibility they don't do it just for the thought of, hey, we can get this guy back. We can get this guy back. If we just play, he can be back next week, and maybe he doesn't. So it could be more for that, because quite frankly, they have Greer as the backup there, right? So they only had 2 quarterbacks. They had to activate both of them. They had to put both of them on the roster. So the quarterback situation out there, they have 2 guys there right now that are there, that have been there for pretty much the whole camp. They have Dak, who was on the sideline last night. I mean, essentially, he might have been calling plays for all we know, right? He was standing right next to McCarthy. He might be like, hey, McCarthy, this is how you run a clock. But I wouldn't be shocked if he played, but I don't think he will. I wouldn't be surprised if his first game back is week 6 against the Eagles.
Before I divert to the Giants here, did you happen to catch the whole Tampa Bay New Orleans fight and basically Bruce Arians instigating it?
I didn't see how it all started. I saw the video of Evans just launching somebody, and then, they kind of admitted that kind of was the jumping off point for them. That game had kind of been flat, and then they kind of got into that scuffle and kind of took off after that. But what was the origin of it?
So after Lattimore made the play and they didn't call a penalty, you see him yelling at somebody on the sidelines. And it's Bruce Arians. He ran right up to the sideline. And I'm like, wait a minute. Bruce Arians is on the sideline during these games? Like, how does Todd Bowles get the job done? And Arians just kind of, like, they were going back and forth. And then the whole Evans-Lattimore rivalry or whatever, because they've been in shoving matches before. And then all of a sudden, that came up. And then I guess Saints players were going after Tom Brady. But it's just funny how it was Bruce Arians with no headset, no nothing on. And he's just yapping at Marshawn Lattimore. I was dying when it happened.
Like a University of Miami game with all the alumni just standing there on the sideline, right?
Exactly. And I'm like, so I'm thinking to myself, how does Todd Bowles coach when the guy that won a Super Bowl for that franchise is basically standing there where he's in his ear or not.
Well, they're 2-0, so I got to say it's a flimsy 2-0, though. Their offense doesn't seem to be nearly as explosive as it's been. And, again, I think that game was at New Orleans yesterday, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Saints had beaten them 4 straight times. So that was a tough win for the Buccaneers. So, it's probably a much better win than the score looks if you look at it, where they went 20-10, something like that. But I think that Saints team, as they're kind of tied to the Eagles a little bit with that draft pick, and everybody was like, this team's going to – I do a segment every Tuesday called Who's In, Who's Out, where I'll take the week's results and then kind of go from that and try to pick who I think the playoff teams are going to be. I've had the Saints in all I do a preseason version before the season. I had them in before the season. I had them in last week, and I'll probably have them in again, even though they lost that game yesterday when I do that segment tomorrow. I like that. Oh, Kamara didn't play. That's a big loss for them.
Talking about the Bucs, they have a gauntlet here with good defenses. Cowboys week 1. Saints week 2. Now you got Green Bay coming up. By the way, they won their first 2 games on the road. Now you got Green Bay coming in there week 3. I mean, Tampa Bay's basically getting the playoffs in the first couple weeks of the season.
Yeah, they're going to have a lot of tiebreakers. Look, I had on Wednesdays, I'll do my Fine 5, Ugly 5. They have been number 2 in my Fine, actually number 3 in my Fine 5 the first 2 weeks of the season. I like that team mainly because I like their defense. Their offense is Brady, and we know they're going to be fine, but I don't think they're an explosive offense. They're more of a methodical dink and dunk you down the field, but they have so many. You have the best decision maker maybe in the history of the game. And then when you got Godwin healthy, he's not out there right now. They add that. I think Fournette looks a lot better than he had last year. I love Evans. He's one of my favorite receivers to watch. So their offense will be fine, but their defense is just ridiculous. They've got such a good defense.
And they got
and they have one of the better defensive minds running it all.
Todd Bowles is a good coach. I got to give credit where credit's due there. I'll tell you who's really impressing me these first 2 weeks of the season. That's Brian Dable. I know it's just Carolina, Mike, but
love him.
They're 2-0. I got to give them credit. They're 2-0, and I got to ask the question, are the Giants going to be a problem in this division this year?
Yes. The answer is yes. And I loved the hire of Dable. We've been talking about it on my show and then in the weeks that I've been a part of this show. I think the culture was changed in New York. They got the right coach finally. I think they have the right GM. They got the right people putting that team together. I don't know how many wins culture is responsible for, but that's a game they lose yesterday. I mean, that's a game where you're kicking field goals and you're just like look, their offense wasn't great yesterday. I mean, Galladay, $21 million. I think he had 2 snaps in the game. But guess what? Good for them for taking a guy who they paid money and not playing him because he doesn't deserve to be out there. So that's a culture setter right there. This guy doesn't deserve to be out here. I don't care what we're paying him. He's not playing. Tony didn't do anything yesterday either. He's supposed to be an explosive guy. Barkley had a decent game, 21 for 72. He had like 3 catches in the game. So you're like, where did they get the offense from? They didn't really. But they just believed that they were in that game. And that's where the culture is. We have changed the mindset here that they believe they can win. Carolina stinks, but you got to be able to win that type of game. You got to be able to win that type of game. I don't care what the final score is. You just scratch and claw. When someone's got your back to the wall, you figure out a way to get that guy off of you. That's what the Giants did yesterday. Do I think they're a factor in the division? Not to win it, but to be a pain in everybody's ass.
I'm glad you mentioned Kenny Galladay. 2 snaps, and then after the game, nowhere to be found. Lockers clean out. You have to wonder if the Giants are just going to cut bait or if he cut bait himself.
I'm imagining, and I'm no cap wizard, but there would be a cap implications in that situation. Is there a taker out there that has some wide receiver problems that thinks, hey, if we get this guy here, maybe he can, he was excellent in Detroit, 2 years ago. I don't know what happened. I mean, you put him on that team last year. Okay, the Giants last year were just a disaster. But you got Brian Dable in there who you thought, all right, this is a guy who not Sammy Watkins, although he was in Buffalo, Stephon Diggs. Gabe Davis. Maybe he could figure out a way to cultivate this guy's talent. Hasn't happened. But that team is definitely – I wouldn't be surprised if they won 6-7 games this year, maybe 8. And then next year, if they have another really good offseason, which I think they should, they got the good people in place. And they had a good offseason this year. They made smart moves this offseason. I think next year that team is going to be in the conversation for the division. In the NFL, it happens so fast. You could be a 4-win team to an 8-win team to a 12-win team like that. Look at the Eagles. I mean, they were a disaster 2 years ago. Last year they made the playoffs. This year people think they can go to the Super Bowl. It happens fast if you have the right people and the right culture.
One thing I liked about that Giants game yesterday, and I didn't like it early, they didn't trust Daniel Jones enough. And I don't think Daniel Jones is their long-term answer at quarterback. But in the second half, you could tell Brian Dable was like, all right, we need to get something here. Saquon's not going to carry our offense. We're going to have you sling the ball a little bit, Daniel. Threw the ball 34 times. But to me, I thought the one time they trusted him, the 3rd and 5, they just did the naked bootleg and said, you know what, Daniel, you're faster than everybody on the field. Go get this first down.
Yeah. And that's the game I watch. I'm not a red zone guy, so I had the Giants game on yesterday. You know, I like to watch the NFC East games and kind of get my, my notes on them. And that play too, yeah, Jones getting the 3rd and 5. It was more, you watch a lot of these games now, and I think even the coaches sometimes get enamored by allowing the quarterback to do so much. Justin Fields last night runs for 2 touchdowns. But when you have to ask him to throw, I'm like, this guy has no idea what he's doing. Like they're all just looking, waiting for the opportunity to take off. So they're dynamic in that. And I think Jones gets into that situation too, where, I just feel like their quarterbacks didn't play for 3 years. And now we're throwing them in immediately and asking them to basically learn on the fly. I don't think these guys have any idea how to play that position at all. And they don't get taught the right way because you're basically using them in ways that you really shouldn't be using the quarterback, but you have to because they're not advanced enough as throwers. So Jones, all right, you're the best guy we got. You take it. And 3rd and 5, he gets that big play. And I agree with you. I don't think Jones he's not the guy that's going to take this team to that next level. I think he's going to be part of getting this team in the right direction, but not take them to the next level.
Is it time for us? We have. But Eagles fan, and you responded to this tweet yesterday. Eagles fans got very, very upset when I said that was a good win against the Lions last week. Look what they're doing to the Commanders, and I saw the responses. I don't know what I'm talking about. I overestimate the Lions. I said no, you overestimate them because the Lions just beat the crap out of the Commanders yesterday.
They underestimate them. No, look, the Lions are similar to the Giants, and guess what? In this NFC field, I do my who's in, who's out. It's hard to find a third wild card team. I wouldn't be shocked if the Lions were 9-8 and were the team that snuck in as a wild card. We talk about the Giants. If you're somebody out there watching right now and you're like, that Giants team, they're starting to move in the right direction. I don't think they can win the Super Bowl. We're not saying that Lions can win the Super Bowl, nor the Giants, but they have certainly changed the culture of those two franchises, bringing in new ideas and new coach. Look, those teams have recycled coaches and it can't get the right guy. When you finally get that right guy, that's your first stepping stone. And I'm not saying Dan Campbell is some X and O wizard, but you have to get the players to believe that we can win. The Giants now have that guy. The Lions have that guy. Oddly enough, we thought getting Ron Rivera into Washington would help them get that guy. For whatever reason, it's not happening. I think they have some talent in Washington. For them to lose that game yesterday shows you 2 things. Maybe Ron Rivera is not that guy anymore. And 2, the Lions are much better than we thought. The Lions, look, I'm on Ross St. Brown. He had another monster day yesterday. At what point do you – look, this isn't like Travis Fulgham having 4 good games and just ripping it up. This guy has done it now for almost a full season where he's just a weapon. When they get Jameson Williams out there, remember, people, Jameson Williams may have been the best receiver in this draft class. He hasn't played for them yet. They hope to get him back in the second half of the year. Goff he's nothing special, but he doesn't, he just knows what to do. I mean, he's been to a Super Bowl before. The guy's been to a Super Bowl before. So that, he's like a Jimmy G. You're not like enamored by the guy, but he makes good decisions. He's not going to beat you by himself, but he doesn't need to get beat you by himself. They have enough weapons. It's just that, they've been so bad for so long. I think we don't respect their weapons. And look, Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator, he dials it up, man. He's not afraid to dial it up. And look, some games that's going to burn him, I would imagine. Carson Wentz had a pretty good game yesterday. He threw for 330 yards again, and he turned the ball over once. He had that snafu in the end zone. So his issues, Wentz is such a weird thing. He had 2020 where he was just a disaster and turned the ball over in every which direction. But other than that year, he had not been a big turnover guy. He had the fumbling problems, but he was not a big turnover guy, in terms of interceptions. I don't know what's happening with Washington's defense either. That defense was supposed to be really ferocious. This is the second year in a row where they have not out of the gates. Chase Young being out, I think, is a problem for them.
Yeah, they just don't have anybody at linebacker and secondary. And that's why I thought guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown would go off yesterday, and he did. And I agree with you. I remember Eagles fans go, we're letting some bum named Amon-Ra St. Brown beat us. I'm like, that bum's been good for a year now. Like, he was better than Devonta Smith last year. Eagles fans don't want to admit that, but he was. And he is becoming a top 10 receiver in this league. He catches everything that's thrown to him, gets yards after the catch, catches a touchdown seemingly every week. He's just breaking NFL records, and it just happened overnight. Like, he was I remember talking to him before his rookie year, and he goes, Jeff, I'm telling you, man, when I figure it out, it's going to be something. And it wasn't wrong. So, again, I like the Lions' offense. I think their offensive line is very good. I like the matchup against Washington. I still thought Washington was going to win because I thought they would beat that zero blitz. And they did later, but Carson Wentz could not escape like Jalen Hurts did last week. And again, this is why the Eagles won and the Commanders didn't.
Yeah, the escapability of Hurts was the difference in that game. Saw Aiden Hutchinson have 3 sacks yesterday. Why? Because Wentz couldn't get out, and Hutchinson got pressure and was able to get him down. Whereas when Hutchinson got pressure, Hurts was able to step through it. I don't think there's any question if you watch the game and take a look at the tape, the all 22, you'll see that Hurts made a lot of smart decisions. He got out. He made, when pressure came, he stepped up through it and saw lanes to get yardage and figured, all right, this week, this is how I'm going to have to do it. Now, he's going to have to evolve, and hopefully the whole offense evolves. But for 1 week, I thought Hurts made a lot of smart decisions when the blitz came. You saw what the blitz did to Wentz yesterday. Now, I know it's hard to describe that to people who don't like Wentz and think Wentz stinks, but part of the thing is you could have put any quarterback back there that didn't have the escapability of Hurts, and they probably would have had similar results. Wentz had a big day throwing the ball. He threw for over 330 yards. He 3 touchdowns yesterday. It's one of those things where you're just like, hey, you have to sometimes give credit to the opponent. Detroit, in this case, last week for the Eagles fans, I think you saw a team that every year, 17 out of 19 years, somebody goes from last to first. I'm not saying Detroit's going to go to first, but they could go from a team that no one thought anything of to a wild card team this year, much like the Eagles did last year.
I can't believe it's been 45 minutes into this show and I haven't mentioned the Philadelphia Eagles yet. And they got a big game tonight against the Minnesota Vikings. You and I are both going to be there, Mike. And I just don't know. I picked the Eagles to win, but I think it can go your way. But I think the big difference in this game is going to be the Eagles' defensive line versus the Vikings' offensive line.
Yeah, this is one of those good discussions where the Eagles gave up 35 to Detroit. When are they going to give up against Minnesota, who has, I think Minnesota has better skill players than Detroit does. Justin Jefferson is, better than Amon-Ra St. Brown. And Amon-Ra St. Brown's no slouch, as we're seeing here. Adam Thielen is a tremendous number 2 guy. Dalvin Cook, very explosive. Their problem is Detroit has guys to block up front. Minnesota is really weak in the middle. Bradbury, not very good. The 2 guards, not very good. They're good at tackle, good, not great. But I think the difference in the game tonight for the Eagles to win has to be, and this is going to be a very big week to see, what does Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave have left in the tank? Last week, they did not have an impact on that game. Detroit's offensive line beat the Eagles' defensive line. can Cox and Hargrave and Jordan Davis and Milton Williams and that group of tackles, they need to win in the center of the Vikings line. That's the weak spot. So the Eagles need to dial up pressure in the middle of that Vikings line, get in the face of Kirk Cousins, which he's not a mobile guy, but last 3 games against the Eagles, he is averaging over 300 yards a game. He has torched them. So this will be an interesting chess match between Gannon, right, and O'Connell, the new coach out in Minnesota, to see, all right, is Gannon going to take the weak spots up the middle and send pressure at Kirk Cousins, or is he going to sit back and O'Connell going to allow Kirk Cousins to do what he's done to the Eagles the last 3 times he's played them, pick them apart, throw for 300 yards? There's the chess match tonight that I'll be watching.
And the Eagles can't sit back here. Look, the Eagles had 16 missed tackles last week. They need to wrap Justin Jefferson up when he gets the ball. They need to wrap Adam Thielen up when he gets the ball. Because, in my opinion, the Vikings are going to force it to Justin Jefferson again, because that's that O'Connell, McVay, Shanahan offense. You get the ball, your playmakers, and you let them do their thing.
Most important, too, don't forget, Dalvin Cook, got to wrap him up. Madison, when he comes in the game, those 2 guys at running back, Dalvin Cook's one of the best in the game when he's going well. Look, and conversely, we talked about, I think last week, was the target situation. You mentioned Justin Jefferson. They, similar to the Eagles last week, Jefferson had 11 targets. The next guy had 4. So you've got to, as you said, make sure that Justin Jefferson, that you know where he is. It'll be interesting to see how the Eagles choose to defend him, because they have zoned Kirk Cousins the last couple times, and he has picked them apart. So what does John Gannon do? Does he ask Slay or Bradbury, hey, you're going to be manned up with Jefferson. The other guy's going to be manned up on the other side with Thielen, and let's see what happens. Because you would think the Eagles can play more man because they have some better linebackers now. But Gannon hasn't really shown through one game anyway that he is changing the way he's calling his defense, even with new personnel.
I think that's what frustrates me with Gannon so much. I said there were 2. I was on CBS 3 Sports Zone last night, and I told Don Bell there were 2 things that bothered me. And the first thing was how they did not use Hassan Reddick as a pass rushing specialist. They kind of had him in coverage a lot, and how they didn't play Jordan Davis enough. And I feel like you got to reverse that and put a little bit more into Kobe Dean in there, and maybe a lot of the problems can be fixed, even the way Gannon runs his defense.
Yeah, I thought, when they got up 17, their mindset was Detroit's going to throw. And I think they called defense with that mindset of Detroit's going to go to the air because they're down 17. And this is where I give Detroit credit, is even down 17, they didn't get away from what they think what they can do, which was run the ball against the Eagles. And the Eagles had a defense that said, well, you're not going to run. And the Lions are saying, well, if you're not going to defend the run, we're going to keep coming after you. So the Eagles thought the Lions were going to get in panic mode in the 3rd quarter, and they didn't. So I thought that was one of the problems with John Gannon last week. He didn't read the room. Hey, the Lions are running the ball against us. We've got to now tell them, okay, you got to start throwing the ball against us. So I think that chess match is going to be interesting to see if the Vikings do the same thing. Well, you're not going to defend the run. We're going to keep running the ball at you, because this Vikings team, as much as they have Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, they could run the ball at you and be very effective. Because, quite frankly, throwing the ball for them, their weak spot is pass blocking up the middle. So it's kind of they've got to pick their spots when they want to throw the ball. They just happen to have 2 great skill guys. Oh, and Jalen Reagor, don't forget about him.
Outside of Jalen Hurts, what Eagles player will we be talking about at this time tomorrow?
It's a good question. Where's the weak spot in the Viking defense? And you could pick a couple spots here. And I think if you look at what the Vikings need to accomplish on defense, it's much like with the Eagles. All right, they got to bracket Brown. He had 13 targets last week. I think the Vikings try to take him out and say, all right, Devonta Smith, let's see if you can pick up the slack this week. So I think tomorrow, if we're looking back at this, I think the Vikings probably try to take Brown out, and Devonta Smith is the guy to find out if he gets picks up the slack. So if the Eagles win, I think it'll be a Devonta Smith game this week. Maybe a Goddard. One of those 2 guys, I think, will be the guy that we're talking about tomorrow. But probably Smith will have to be the one that picks up the slack.
You have an early prediction for this before I let you go?
I mean, it's before 8 o'clock in the morning, so by the time I get to my show, I might change my mind. But so far, I'm going Eagles 31-28.
I like it, Mike. I picked them to win by 7, by 10. I didn't make a final score yet. Maybe I'll save that for the sports bash later today. But
Yeah, I'm feeling like 31-28. I feel like you know, keep this in mind too. Oh, the Vikings gave up 30. The Vikings last week, you weren't playing on the road, so now you're going to have to deal with the Eagles' noise. That makes a difference. We saw what it did to the Eagles the week before. So let's not take what the Vikings did a week ago against Green Bay. And then Green Bay last night, of course, beat Chicago. That Chicago team is getting better. I mean, they changed their coach too, but they're not. I mean, they just don't have any skill guys. They have no speed on offense, but they're getting better. But you see what Green Bay did to the Bears last night, and then you're like, oh, look what Minnesota did to them. We got to stop comparing who does what against who. It's a week-to-week proposition in this league. Styles make the fights. As every style changes, you might match up better with this team's style, but you might not match up well with that team's style. That doesn't mean that Detroit's better than Minnesota, but in the end, Detroit's style might be more of a problem for Philadelphia than Minnesota's style is. And I think the offensive line issues for the Vikings is generally the kind of games that Philadelphia will get you, is when you have line problems where they can get pressure, where they don't have to send pressure, right? They don't want to blitz. So when they don't have to send or manufacture their own pressure, that's when the Eagles generally will excel on defense, was when they can get pressure with their own guys, with their front four, and not have to blitz. And I think that should happen tonight. If it doesn't happen tonight, we're going to be talking about this tomorrow. Is all right, where's the interior of this line? Where's Fletcher Cox? Where's Javon Hargrave? And I want to watch the snaps there, because there was a series in week one, mid fourth quarter, big drive, and the Eagles had their two backup tackles in a big drive late in the game. And I'm wondering if John Gannon thinks, hey, my young kids are getting me a little bit more production right now, and I want to see if that kind of slowly happens as this season goes on, or do the two veterans make a big difference tonight?
Mike, always a pleasure having you on. You're going to be on every Monday. I love breaking down these games with you. I'll be seeing you in probably, about 6-7 hours or so?
If I can get there, man. It's a long day. These 7:20s come a little early for me on a Monday.
Hey, try being up till 1 o'clock doing overreactions and getting up for this.
Yeah, I'll be at Ocean Casino tonight for my show at 2 o'clock. We got a long list of people breaking down the game, and so we'll be there from 2 to 6, and then we're going to try to rush up to Philly. We got John McMullen at 3 and Mike Missinelli at 5:30.
Ooh, what a star-studded cast today. All right, Mike, once again, have a good day, and I'll hopefully catch you tonight.
Yep, I will be DMing you a time here soon.
All right, sounds great. Thanks, Mike.